largest theaters, one of the great theaters in New York City, and Torn Page is one of the smallest, basically also hosted out of a living room. Tony, where are you now?
I'm actually in Paris. My partner Leanne Brand and I are here to present at a conference about the New York School of Poetry. I did a production of Frank O'Hara's Try a couple of years ago, so I'm going to be talking about that. But it's great because Leanne is going to be able to bring a bunch of special guests to the poetry reading segment of our presentation.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is important to understand that New York City, the landscape of this theater is a kaleidoscope of very different organizations, but they also so similar because they are different, because they are here in the city, and Torn Page is one of those. Tell us a little bit, Tony. You just worked on also on an anti-war play that came out from the 60s.
Well, yeah, I think it was actually written in the early 70s. So Torn Page is named in honor of my parents, Rip Torn and Geraldine Page. And Rip was very good friends with the poet Michael McClure. And not many people know this, but Rip actually won an Obie for directing McClure's play The Beard in 68. Spider Rabbit is it's a very intense sort of absurdist anti-war piece that Michael wrote, and I think it was a response to the Vietnam War at the time. But it's a fable, and it basically talks in a poetic way, in a comic way, and in a very kind of crazy way about the consciousness that leads to war. I really think it's a piece about how difficult it is to be a true pacifist while taking part in the society that really makes war almost inevitable sometimes, it seems. That's what the piece is. And I'm actually going to show a short excerpt from it. Mm-hmm. If we have the video lined up, just 6 minutes of it. It's a 40-minute piece. And tomorrow we'll be streaming it for one day only. It'll be on the website of tornpage.org. And we'll also be raising money for the Ukrainian Children's Relief Fund. That information will be available. The main thing is that I just want to say briefly before we do this, I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York. And even though I grew up on the West Side, the Chelsea neighborhood, my artistic home has really been the Lower East Side, East Village, working with Richard Foreman, working at the Public, working at, PS 122 now, Performance Space, theaters like Theater for a New City, it's like, that's my artistic home. And that's also a huge center of Ukrainian American life. And so for me, all this is very personal, what's going on over there. It feels like my people, even though my heritage is different. And also Julie Ellis-Muse, who played Ma Ubu with me when I did Ubu, Sings Ubu, is from the Detroit Ukrainian community. So I'm very happy to be here to show my support to the brave people of the Ukraine. And to share this piece, which I think is, says something interesting about the mental state that leads to violence and war.
Good. So let's look at the segment, and then maybe we talk a bit afterwards. Are you playing it, or our team?
I think that your tech team has it.
Okay. Yeah, it is.
Ready to go.
Those are my carrots. This is my electric song. This is my duffel bag. This is my phone. This is my hat. I'm Spider Rabbit. thirsty. Woo. I'm thirsty, There are 3 hand grenades on the table. This is my spoon, this is my head, this is my double bag. This is my electric saw. And these are my carrots. Hi. I'm Spider-Man. I hate war. I'm Spider-Rabbit. Hi. It's another hand grenade.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing, Tony, and thanks to Matt Cohn, who gave us also this segment.
Matt filmed the run through for us. It's just the workshop of something I'm doing with director Dan Safer. We built the show together in a week upstate, and this is a work in progress version.
Yeah, it's one of those legendary, in a way, New York loft performances, an anti-war play coming a bit out of the Vietnam time. What did you discover when you played that Spider Rabbit who says he hates war, but he has hand grenades in his duffel bag.
Yeah, he tries to destroy the hand grenades, but there are more. And as the play goes on, he's sort of taken over by his own warlike nature. You know, I first saw this as a child. I was like a teenager. I saw the legendary downtown comic actor Taylor Mead do it. And it really struck me. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen at the time. And it was very, very powerful. And it scared me. It was a very funny and very scary play. And my friend Richard Ryan, who runs Verse Theater of the Americas, kept saying we should do a McClure play. I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be this. Yeah. But you know, people say, well, this character is very psychotic in a sense. He keeps shifting between like two different kind of states of being, this sort of like innocent childlike version, and then this really kind of harsh, violent version. But I don't think that I think that's basically the duality of Spider Rabbit is the duality of everybody who tries to be a good person and tries to be pacifistic, but we're all part of a society that's basically a machine for conflict. And that's what I got out of working on this play, was an exploration of my own sort of like dichotomy and what we all deal with, the moral dilemma we're all dealing with. You know, can we really be pacifistic? Can we change? Anyway, that's what it's working on the piece is all about.
Thank you. And it really worked. And Michael McClure also as a poet who wrote for the theater, who got, if I remember right, arrested every evening when he performed himself, the beard or others. It's quite a stunning part of his history.
The beard famously ends with a sex act that was illegal to be presented at the time. So they happily went to jail every night.
Happily went to jail every night. Great. How would we time it? Should we move over to Tender Button Press?
Yeah. Michael McClure is a poet, and we do lots of work from poets at Torn Page. And Leanne Brown is going to introduce the next section. We have a wonderful group of poets here in Paris who are going to be joining us to support Ukraine.
Thank you.
Here she is.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Leanne, for joining us.
Hi, Frank. Hi, everybody. I'm broadcasting from Paris. I'm looking out to the courtyard, and I see a Ukrainian flag on a window, just 3 windows over. I just have 2 poems I'm going to read, and then I'll introduce. I have 2 other groups. So this is what I wrote just when I heard the war in Ukraine was happening a few weeks ago. War. Poison comes out of the tap. Money for nothing. A little child in a parking deck has seen a building fall, quote, with people in it. Rolling over the city at random, a huge round claw, crushing cars with or without people. Little empty arch, dusty, inexorable, vengeful and revengefully far, but very near. Is this what we were born for? And then the other poem I'm going to read is after a tarot deck study I've been doing. It's for the Tower card. TV, Tinder, the Tower, lightning. The Tower being card of the year. Bolt of light hits tower. The crown comes off. People fall, follow with each other. Oh, I can think of it as a break in the poem. I was stuck in the middle of when the towers fell. It took me many years to finish it. I really never did. It changed everything. Now I don't know what will happen, but I do know it's a big inner explosion, outer transformation. The tower is being toppled, a series of explosions. Buildings are burning, illumination in burning. Sugar is sweet, this is bitter. The dragons of dawn pull me out of language. They are the energies of a dream I can ride. I can see when they will take me down the geyser of water. Then I give the Prince of Love to behold in my daily garden. Visitation, sword and spectrum at the ready. I hear a voice say, you can't put the blood back in the body. I finally forced myself to watch. My heart broke numb. Separate mind and body. That's a very serious injury. I both overhear and experience tonight. The terrible crystal. Every angel is terrible. You can't put the blood back in the body. You can't put the lightning back in the bottle. You can't put the sword back in the spectrum. You can't put the hand inside of a vector. You can't take a picture inside of a mountain. You won't know when the cake is finally ready. You can't bomb the poem. It's here. And now I'm going to get my friend Lytle Shaw to read. He'll read 2 poems. Lytle?
Oh, am I?
Yes, say your name.
Hi, I'm Lytle Shaw. I'm going to read a poem called The Hansen-Spankreet Complex. That's for the Center for Land Use Interpretation. Craving the Hansen horn, I went in search of the Hansen's complex learning pond, where I would find the operative Hansen Vivian, captain of the Spankreet complex, the Hansen-Spankreet complex. I was literally blown off my course by Hansen's major alluvial fans. A Spirian Tier typhoon forced me to turn complete cartwheels at the aggregate mining area of the Hansen-Spankreet complex. Vivian Hansen now silenced the typhoon with the Hansen horn, expediting the assembly of engineered plateaus and causeways, the ubiquitous functional structures fringing the complex's learning pond, fed by the Schlitz aquifer. Meadows glowed a spectral green, wind changing 4 directions in minutes, when Robert Vivian, the brother of Hansen Vivian, spotted a subsurface contamination plume jetting 12 stories, threatening the Schlitz aquifer. After a sputtering of the Perkins noise burst across the Hansen-Spankreet complex, the Hansens instantly recognized the threat and gripped hard the Hansen horn, directing interns across the capped pits toward incursions from a division of Perkins-Elmer. Puffs of hot wind swept through the streets of the Hansen-Spankreet complex. Corn slurry. Hansen Vivian hit his head, a sickening, sulfurous smell fogged regions of the capped pit at the call of the Perkins noise. Compromising the learning pond, corn slurry bubbled over the Hansen Ridge from the junction of Perkins-Elmer, causing the Schlitz aquifer to percolate up through precast concrete structural members as interns churned furiously at safety valves. Vivian Hansen again manned the Hansen horn. I was having a hard time getting a turn. Vivian expedited the assembly of a temporary corn slurry causeway at the Perkins-Elmer Gap, capping the Schlitz aquifer breach with a structure of great utility to the Hansen-Spankreet complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Lytle. Now we have one more performance from Lisa Robertson and Jean-Pierre Antoine. Okay, y'all are on. Thank you. So just can sit and they'll see you.
Okay. Well, we'll.
I'll sit behind.
Right.
Probably the bar is not.
Yes, it's on.
We're on.
Oh,
We're
yes,
on?
yes.
Oh, okay. Well, come. Okay. So we are going to chant a little text from poet and artist, Belgian poet and artist Marcel Brotars. And it's made up of 3 words in French. which translated would be object, metal, and spirit or mind. So let's go. Objet, métal, esprit. 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 Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe Leanne, tell us a little bit about Tender Button Press.
Well, it's a over 30-year collective of a lot of friends and poets and cross-disciplinary artists. I've been based in New York or wherever I am. And I usually publish experimental poetry by women and other gender expansive beings. And it's usually sort of avant-garde, very playful work. I'm interested in expanding the realms of poetry in the page and on the stage and in the streets.
Mm.
And on the
Yeah. You are in Paris representing, I think, the New York School of Poets in a way, and to speak about them. They're often known for their situational poems, like the Frank O'Hara's or the Carlos Williams or many others, but not as openly political or socially engaged on the first view. How is that? Is that changing? Is that a hallmark of New York poetry, or is it an engagement like we heard earlier? Tony Kushner read a poem from Milosz, Czesław Milosz, about hope and war and how to cope with it. How is the engagement at the moment of poets with the new situation we are in?
Well, in New York itself, there's many, many circles of poets. New York school poetry is sort of a particular thread of, like you're saying, Frank O'Hara and all that amazing everydayness and this playfulness of language. But I would say there's politics in that, and that you're trying to just be alive in the present moment, and you're like being playful with and being perceptive of what's going on around you and interweaving it with all of culture. And I don't think it's about the personalist political, but it's in a more playful kind of language way. But I think there's, like I said, there's many styles of poetry in New York that overlap, many circles.
The first poem you read, which is about the war, and then the beautiful second one, but says you can't bomb this poem, it actually exists. But tell us about the moment when you said, I'm going to sit down and write a poem about what happens in Ukraine.
Well, just sometimes I feel like this vibration up moves me to, I have to write something. It just seems, just this impulse that happens. And I actually wrote that on a piece of stationery. I haven't even typed it up yet, but I wrote it because I knew it was something that I wanted to keep track of. And it was just something I just had to let out. That's what I think it is related to what you're saying about the occasional poem that New York school poets do. to try to write what arises in the day, what's happening, and you relate it to what you see in the news, what you feel, and where you are. But I wrote a letter to myself about it, and I sort of knew it was a poem as I was writing it. I just knew I had to write something down, because it just like your molecules sort of vibrate to a higher level, and you say, I got to let this out. And then later you look at it and say, oh, that's a poem.
Mm-hmm. We heard throughout the day from quite deep connections actually the New York theater community has to Ukrainian artists, because there's also a large community, whether it's in Pittsburgh or Chicago or Long Island or in New York City. How is it in the New York scene? Are there connections to the Ukrainian contemporary writers of poetry?
There's definitely, there's connections all over the world. I can't name them right off the top of my head. I'm sure there are, but I know that there've been a lot of benefits throughout all the art, schools and groups in in the poetry communities across New York. I mean, like the Bowery Poetry Club, St. Mark's Poetry Project. There's a lot of action going on, and online too. And like a lot of the musicians are mixing, like I think Patti Smith was doing something the other day. But yeah, it's a lot of cross-pollination and activation.
Yeah, it's a great outreach. I think it was Brecht, and he came up earlier, also with Kushner and with Eustace, who said, what will we sing about in dark times? And he said, well, we're going to sing about the dark times. What do you feel? What should we be? What will you be thinking about?
Well, it is it's a challenge to write about, write around these dark things, but I definitely will. Yeah, I had to really look for a poem that I thought would be appropriate, because I do write about more celebratory light things. I try to attend toward that, but I think that I also write a lot of ballads that tell stories, and I think that's one way that I think I can deal with the stories of things that happen that are dark, like stories we have to tell each other, so they won't be repeated, in history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, Tony performed a poem performance. There is a long history of poetry and theater, and perhaps this is also a time where it will reconnect. We just heard a choreographer before. He's outside of the cornfields of Kiev. He said, I can't dance, I'm writing now poetry. There is a long history, I think, of New York poets, right, engaging with theater and performance.
Yes, there's a lot of poets theater throughout the generations, and we're sort of continuing that strand of like doing plays in our living rooms, and we're a place where the language is the star, like you really can have anything be a character in any situation. There's no limit to, what you can have a mountain be a character, or you can have anybody talk to anybody else in a poet's play.
Yeah, and many do argue that perhaps one of the very, very first off shows, or it was invented by poets, and Frank O'Hara, they said, let's just, perform our poets here. And of course, it will never get into theater. It was even never on their mind. But there is a strong connection. The living theater held that up very much. They felt so close to the artists from the Beat Generation who they hosted and also performed. And I think they did the William Cullen Williams play themselves. So you're part of a great tradition, and look forward also that in these times, it will reemerge perhaps also and take a stand. Because often New York theater often is so commercial that we don't have those theater wizards, but the Broadway industry, the big machine, and to really say this is something that is art, and it's for the mind, and it's for healing and to create meaning for the time we live in.
Yeah, I'm really part of a poetry community that does ballads on the street corner. I mean, I do and keeping things wild and keeping them full of imagination is what poets do. That's necessary anywhere for anybody. If you lose imagination and wildness, you're really lost. So that's what we want to keep doing.
That's true. That is true. Well, thank you. You kept the imagination alive, that beautiful Marcel Proth's reading. I will keep that with me. Thank you for taking time out of your precious time in Paris I'm sure you missed the dinner because of us. So thank you. Thanks to Tony, Tone Page, and the Tender Button Press for
pleasure and honor.
participating.
To be included. Thank you.
Bye
And hello
bye.
to the
Thank you.
group. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. We're going to move over from that tiny torn page where like 10, 15, 20 people can sit to that great